One of the things I think we get a little bit wrong about the way we celebrate Easter is that we can plan it, is that we can see it coming. I don't mean to downplay how helpful it is that we can see on the calendar X Sunday is Easter Sunday, and that we can then line up all the volunteers and get the hymns ready and the Easter lilies. That's super helpful for those of us who have to plan things like that. But we lose something about how the actual story of the resurrection plays out, especially the way it played out for the community of Jesus' followers who find themselves completely unprepared and surprised by what happens there, and the way they are frozen inside of their fear and shock there. It's one of the reasons I really value how the week after Easter Sunday, when we pull out all the stops on the organ, literally, and trumpet lilies and banners and all that sort of thing, and the very next Sunday, every year we come back to this more complicated, sometimes kind of darker and paradoxical and ambivalent and even bittersweet Easter appearance story. The same day Jesus rises from the dead, right, with the glorious news from the angels, he's not here, he's risen, and his appearance to Mary, Jesus comes into the locked room where the disciples are all huddled because they are afraid. And this is the thing that gets me every year we retell this story. This is later on the same Easter day that they've heard the news that the tomb is empty, that at least two of the disciples had physically gone and seen with their own eyes, and Mary has actually seen Jesus and come back and reported to the disciples, Jesus is alive, and I've seen him and talked to him. I've seen the Lord, she says, and they're still afraid. And they're huddled inside this room because they can't see a way forward. Right? Nothing makes sense. Everything they had ever seen and known in all their lives told them that death gets the last word. It might be sad, it might be terrible, but that's how it is. Everything they had lived through told them, if the empire crucifies you, that's the end of the story. No hope. Let's figure out how to go back to our old lives. And they're afraid now that if they get identified in the street, they'll get lynched next. They'll get stoned to death by an angry mob or executed the way Jesus was. They're all just afraid. And most tragic of all for the followers of Jesus, they can't see a way forward. So they lock themselves inside the doors. And this is the thing that absolutely gets me every year, every time I read through this story in John 20. That Jesus doesn't wait to be invited in. Jesus doesn't wait for them to work up the courage to go outside and find him and see if he's really alive again. Jesus doesn't even stand outside and knock. Hey guys, it's me, Jesus, let me in. Jesus just shows up inside the locked door, sort of lets himself in, as he always does, right? Inviting himself in like he did at Zacchaeus' house, like he's always inviting himself over, and because he knows we aren't going to have the courage or even the hope to invite Jesus in if he knocks. So he shows up amongst the disciples, and the first words out of his mouth for people who can't see a way forward, who have nothing but distress and trouble in their hearts, is peace be with you. And then he shows them, it's me, it's the same one who went to a cross, right? That seemed like a dead end, right? A cross is end of story. But look, here are the wounds, here's proof. I'm the one who went to death, and there's a way forward. I'm here to tell you we will take new steps together out of this room together. And even though Thomas isn't there and can't believe the news that Jesus is alive again, Jesus shows up for Thomas the very next week as well, going through the exact same thing all over again. So it's not that Thomas has any more doubts than the rest of the disciples. It's that Thomas can say them out loud, and the rest of them have just hunkered down and kept them close to the vest. Thomas says out loud, I can't believe he's alive unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger in his side. So Jesus shows up. Because Thomas's fear is just like the rest of them, is just like so often our fear as well. When we can't see a way forward anymore. And when that happens, when you get to one of those places in life where you can't see, I don't know what the next step is, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and you just feel overwhelmed, we shut down, we hunker down, we lock the doors in our lives because maybe that's all we know how to do. Because it feels like, at least like the old line goes, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. It's staying inside, locked inside the room. At least it's familiar. And Jesus keeps showing up and meeting us where we are. So if we find ourselves in a season of life where I can't see the way forward, I can't figure out how to make the next step of my life work, I can't figure out how I'm going to make my career work, or put my family back together, or find out what my vocation is in life, or manage getting along with neighbors who I really don't like, or dealing with people who frustrate me, whatever it is where we find ourselves and I don't know how to move forward. The good news we are given in the gospel is that the same Jesus who's risen from the dead doesn't leave us inside locked doors. He comes and meets us where we are, and he doesn't shame us, doesn't say, I can't believe you can't figure out how to get out of here. I can't believe you were afraid. There's none of that from Jesus. Instead, there's simply, okay, first, peace. Peace be with you. And then from there, I need you to know there is a way out of this enclosed space. I need you to know there's a way beyond what seemed like a dead end. The cross seemed like a dead end for Jesus. The upper room the disciples are locked in seems like a dead end. Jesus shows them his wounds and say, look, what seems like a dead end is not the end of the story. And then he says to them, I'm sending you outward, and my Spirit will be with you, the same way the Spirit of God is breathed out over all creation at the beginning. And from there, Jesus leads his followers, his community, his friends, outward. Sometimes we don't get much more glimpse than just the next step, one step after another. And as much as we might want to know what the whole path is, sometimes all we get is one step at a time. But when the living Jesus, who can show up inside locked doors, comes to meet you, one step at a time is enough. So this Sunday, we want you to join us for that conversation, to look at what it means when Jesus meets us where we are, and to discover that what seemed like dead ends in our lives aren't the end of the story. Jesus meets us there, takes us by his wounded hand, and leads us forward into somewhere new. That's the conversation you're invited to be a part of with us this coming Sunday. See you then.